Daniel, we have breaking news on a Friday. Yeah, man. College football has been flush with breaking news over the last however many weeks, however many months, however many Fridays. I feel like everything always breaks on a Friday. And we're going on the air now to report something that we've heard has been in the works for a couple weeks, a couple months now, perhaps out of necessity, the ACC following suit and expanding. The ACC officially voting to invite Cal, Stanford, and SMU into the conference effective 2024. Notably, Cal and Stanford will take a 30% TV share. SMU playing for free for 9 years. We can get into that and much, much more. News broke earlier on Friday. That's why you and I have hit the record button here to get some actual reaction to what has transpired in the ACC. Dan, how are you today?
I'm good, Ty. I'm good, and nothing makes sense. It continues to not make sense, and all I know is, look, this is a move for everybody's saying survival. Everybody's saying, this is what Stanford and Cal had to do, right? They're left on an island after the Pac-12 is misrun or disbands or is abandoned or whatever, however you want to position all of the different factors that led to the end of the Pac-12. Here is where we are, and Stanford and Cal had little choice if they wanted to use football as a way to make revenue, to generate publicity for athletic departments, for the school. Not that Stanford and Cal need to generate publicity for academics, but certainly, it's an ongoing process to stay in the public eye. So this is why we're here, and we can get into the specifics in a second. But I'd be remiss if we didn't also mention this is happening the day before the season is beginning. And not only is it the day before the season is beginning for all of us, but it's the day before the season is beginning for Stanford, who is currently, the football team is in Hawaii, and local officials, or Stanford officials, found out at local time, 3 a.m. Hawaiian time, with the plan being, quote, we'll wake up the players at a certain point and let them know about the news. So
should we be going Hawaii +3? In this matchup?
Or Stanford minus anything, depending on your vantage point, that, there's survival in the outlook, I guess, for Stanford football. And the other thing is, because this is the day before the season, we should also mention that you have very little time to join what, Ty?
Oh, that's right. Good call. Run the Board is our season-long and weekly pick'em game. This is like your absolute last chance to get in from week one on the season-long contest. Again, Run the Board. You got to enter now before kickoff. Give yourself the best chance of winning not only that coveted spot on our board of trustees, but also the top scorer in week one gets a PlayStation 5.
Yes, it's a handful of games to pick against the spread, and there is a tiebreaker, if a bunch of people get like 9 out of, 10, 12 games in week one?
We got 12 games. Yeah, we got 12 games.
So maybe a handful of people go 10-2, but I think it's a Clemson-Duke total point tiebreaker. Well, ultimately, that's, a razor-thin margin to win a PS5. So I would get in on this if I were you before kickoff on Saturday. So that's 11:59 a.m. Eastern time. I wouldn't cut it that close. I'd get it in a lot sooner. But run the board.
You don't want to flirt with disaster here.
No.
We put a lot of our hard-earned cash into this prize for week one.
Yes.
And this game as a whole for the season. So playruntheboard.com is a page we set up if you want to go and get more details. Yes. That'll link you over to our Patreon. If you sign up for the game, obviously you have a chance to play for all these cool prizes in the Verballerhood, but you get all the other perks, the bonus content, the ad-free content, access to the Patreon community,
and Discord community.
Perk. There's 1,000 perks that you get access to if you join up and decide that you want to play this game, but it is your last chance to get in from week one on, if you really want to play for the grand prize.
Yeah.
There will be other opportunities, of course, but not for the grand prize. If you want to get in on the grand prize, you got to do that right now. So that's where we're at.
Yes. And the Discord community, by the way, enthusiastic, energetic, electric, big, stanky, lubricious. You know, all the words that I like to talk about. Let's
Indeed.
talk ACC, though. PlayRunTheBoard.com once again. Verballers.com. Thank you, of course, for all of your encouraging and ongoing support. The ACC will now have officially 18, I'm going to call it affiliated members, but 17 full-time members. And if you are reading a number of the newsbreakers, I saw Nicole Auerbach talking about it, Ross Dellinger of now Yahoo, Brett McMurphy, Action Network. So there's been a lot that's come out this morning as we record this about the future of the ACC. And it seems that at least one of the reasons from the ACC side is if they dip below a certain threshold of teams, and we stare into the distance at Chapel Hill, Tallahassee, and Clemson, South Carolina.
Right.
If they dip below that threshold, was it 15 teams? 15 or 16 teams, then ESPN reserves the right to renegotiate the ACC grant of rights TV deal. And so, or just the TV deal, sorry. And so this is almost like an insurance policy against what a lot of people view as a near-term future of some of those higher profile teams in the conference.
Yeah, and I think what we're finding out about the current state of college football is that if your league only has a certain number of teams, it becomes a risk to itself, let's say. We saw the actions by the Big 12 and by the SEC and the Big 10 to expand. And I think there is a real danger that if you are not expanding at this point, you are leaving yourself in a really vulnerable position. And so while obviously we're going to laugh at the Atlantic Coast Conference taking on two teams from the Pacific time zone, as well as a team from Texas, you understand, at least on some level, where they're coming from. It is very much a strength in numbers strategy. They are also doing this as an insurance policy should some other teams decide that they want to bolt. If Florida State decides that they get enough private cash and they want to leave and go independent for a year before they can join the SEC or the Big 10, this doesn't necessarily put the conference in a position where, like we saw with the Pac-12, now they're running out of teams. Now there's a very few number of teams that actually want to join, and there are many more that are trying to flee the sinking ship. The ACC is trying to be proactive from that standpoint, and I think stave off potential implosion. That being said, from a fan's perspective, like, are you really going to be that excited about the looming Stanford-Wake Forest rivalry? Or the Cal-NC State rivalry? NC State, by the way, per our friend Nicole Auerbach over at The Athletic, mentioned that NC State was one of the teams, maybe the only team, that flipped its vote over to yes.
That was the big story, was they were a no, and then they became a yes to get to that 12 out of 15 threshold with North Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State, I believe, the ones voting no, right?
So, I mean, that to me seems, from a fan's perspective, do we get much out of this? Probably not. This is administrative. This is conferences trying to save their own hide. And from the SMU standpoint, this is very costly. SMU is going to need to tap into some of that old booster money, Dan, because not taking a TV revenue share for 9 years is a pretty big commitment. SMU for a long time has been longing to get into the ranks of the Power Five. And there are deep pockets at SMU. I understand why they'd want to do it. I understand they think that this football program can be a lot more than it's been. But now there's going to be a very, very interesting story to be told on the SMU side with how much power do boosters have to run this football program? Coaches, who are they answering to? Who is the loudest voice in the room? If in fact this is going to be essentially privately funded on the football side,
right?
I realize it may not be the biggest story in college football media on this day as we go into week 1 of the new season, but SMU and the chain of command and how that potentially shakes up the command and reporting structure for other schools around the country. That's interesting to me. That's really interesting looking forward.
Yeah, it's all fascinating. There's so many moving pieces with the geography here and the fact that I saw Stanford and Cal. So like they're getting a reduced TV share, but eventually they're going to get full TV shares and full, postseason everything shares. But so now with Stanford eventually getting the full TV share, with Oregon and Washington partial, and then eventually full, USC, UCLA, of course, they're getting full already in the Big Ten, and then the four corner schools, the Arizona schools, Colorado, and Utah, getting full shares in the Big 12. We're now at the point where 10 of the 12 current Pac-12 schools are getting paid a good chunk of money either now or eventually. So they all seemed reasonably attractive to TV networks. Yeah. And so one can only conclude that, well, it's interesting fodder for other big teams, that to have those matchups, to have Wisconsin, USC, or Oregon, Michigan, whatever, like it just produces more, right? More tonnage that either the Pac-12 couldn't produce, or Washington State and Corvallis are the biggest money losers in the history of college athletics. I don't think it's that. That was just a
Well,
a
I mean,
joke.
look, what it tells me is that the TV networks are willing to pay for most of.
Yeah. And the Pac-12 was terribly run by the
terribly
presidents.
Run.
Yeah.
But what this tells me is that TV networks were not at all put off by the brand power of most of the schools in the Pac-12.
No.
What they were put off by was the $50 million asking price that somebody within the Pac-12 apparently told George Kliavkoff that was their worth.
I'm pretty sure it was either Washington State or Arizona State's president. I think it was. I feel like this is just. I think it's
okay.
ASU. I think it's
it's
ASU.
okay if you're not worth $50 million a year.
Totally.
It's okay. Most of us aren't. Okay.
Not speaking for us. I do believe that the Solid Verbal is a $50
$50
million annual
but you
property.
You get my point.
Yeah.
You get my point with that. And perhaps their eyes were just a little bit bigger than their stomach, or vice versa. I don't know what the proper metaphor is, but you get my point. It seems as if they were worth a reasonable amount of money that they probably could have signed on and gotten long before all of this conference realignment business happened over the last couple months, but they chose not to. And again, it speaks to what you said earlier, the Pac-12 not being appropriately run, maybe not running the numbers responsibly on their own, because teams have gone elsewhere and gotten a payday. I'm curious now to see what the next move is for Oregon State and Washington State. It really leaves them in a bit of a lurch. Whether it's merging with the Mountain West, I guess that seems to be the most obvious thing for them. But that's probably where the story goes next, as well as what does Florida State do? Does Florida State take kindly now to the fact that this is official?
It's going to be wild to follow. I also saw Stanford. It's something like 22 of the 36 sports played at Stanford will be unaffected because the ACC doesn't offer a number of those sports. So Stanford is not canceling those sports, but rather obviously using some of the revenue here to save some of these sports. And they're just going to sort of bounce around the West Coast. I don't know if it's technically an independent team or they'll join this conference for this or that conference for this. But yeah, a lot of those Stanford sports will be like athletic electrons, just sort of bouncing around the Western region, figuring out how to schedule things, it's just an odd thing. But that does happen across college sports, that like one school wants to wrestle and the other schools in their conference have no interest in wrestling. And so they join, the Big Sky, or they join, the Big 12, whatever, so that the wrestling team can have a home. So I think that's going to be the case with Stanford specifically. And just in terms of what the ACC is getting, one, Notre Dame is getting an extra game, right? Because they're absolutely going to mandate that they play Stanford every year, I assume, right? Because they already do play Stanford every year. So that means Notre Dame
was one of the biggest drivers of
They were
this,
driving
reportedly.
this bus. Yeah. So that means Notre Dame is going to get themselves a nice new NBC game, right? Because the Stanford game will be, I guess, be on NBC when it's in Palo Alto. But when it'll be an ESPN or whatever game when it's it's always going to be an ACC game. So they get an extra new scheduling partner to bring to South Bend. So that's good for Notre Dame. And Stanford has been down, but they've at least shown flashes of being nationally big time, winning Rose Bowls. David Shaw, the peak of David Shaw was very good. Certainly everybody knows about what Jim Harbaugh did to turn around that program. So we know that they have a ceiling 10, 11 in the right time, and whatever the ACC looks like moving forward, we know that they have that incredible ceiling athletically. Cal has been, since realignment started in like 2009, 2010, I think the best Cal people can hope for is a 7-5 regular season. If memory serves, I don't think they've done better than 7-5 in a regular season since like 2009, 2010. We've certainly seen SMU have good seasons, at least lately, but couldn't hang on to a coach. And it's not a difficult place to win, but it's pretty far down the pecking order of college football destinations in that region, specifically in Texas. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But I don't see a ton of annual upside from a competitive standpoint, pending, I guess, what Troy Taylor is or is not able to do. But, it's, once again, it's about Stanford and Cal survival. It's about what SMU perceives to be their rightful place in the sport, and it's ACC survival when schools ultimately decide to leave at the top. So here we are.
All right. Well, look, write in. Let us know what your thoughts are. We're all across social media. We'd appreciate hearing from the Verballerhood. As we said towards the top of the show, playruntheboard.com, your absolute last chance to get in on the season-long game. And, of course, play for a PlayStation 5 in week 1. We'll have great prizes every week. By signing up, you also get access to all of our other Patreon perks. But this is your last chance to do some of that stuff. So playruntheboard.com for more details on the game. Verballers.com is the larger Patreon. Hope to see you out there. We'll be on social media all weekend. Look, games. We had games Thursday night. There are games Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night. It's a long weekend ahead. Enjoy your Labor Day. Enjoy the game. Stay solid.
Peace.